We are now live on Facebook and YouTube with Colin Whitebeard. And I am so happy to have you on this podcast live stream situation, as it's something we've been talking about for a few months now. How you doing, brother?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm on holidays at the moment, so enjoying that. So detached from
Where are
work.
you at?
Sorry.
Is this your house?
Yeah, I'm at my house at the moment. Just sitting on
Cool.
the
Because
back bench.
it looks quite nice with both of our backgrounds being greenery.
Yeah. By design. I had it facing the
Yeah.
house before, and I thought that looks shit.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
funny when playing with cameras and stuff. When I first put the camera on myself, it was bad lighting, and we were just at Jamboree yesterday, so my face is actually completely full of sunburn. And so I had this funny moment where I turned on the camera and I was like, "Jesus, dude, whew, I gotta change the old angle here." There we go.
Yeah.
Those are the funny little technicals, though, isn't it? I'm going to go into Facebook and tag your name in this, just so your friends will come up onto the situation.
Okay, cool.
So post. There you go. That's done. So that's done. That's the funny part about these live streams is a lot of the starts of them are technical things like that. Whereas back in the past, you'd never go live unless everything was all completely ready. And so this, I believe, is a representation of the newness of our time, where things are more raw, more unfiltered, less less manufactured. And I hope that that's the way the world is going.
Yeah.
Nathan from Castle came on just to say two powerful souls. So um, we've already got
Love
some
that, man.
cool viewers and comments going.
Yes. Yeah.
What have you been up to inside yourself?
Inside myself, working on myself. Yeah, myself has been my primary focus for a long time now, I guess. Since Probably since the part that used to I think of as myself sort of fell away, crashed and burned. So since then, it's been an exploration of going in, and it's it doesn't matter how deep I go. As soon as I think I've got it figured out, something will come along and kick me in the ass and keep sending me deeper.
That was something I just had that experience and made a video about it a couple of days ago. I was looking at myself and I was like, "Holy fuck, man! You could be so much better, or so much like more true to yourself than you are." Hey, and then I looked back at myself and I was like, I pretty much go through that once every month or two.
Yeah. Well, mine's process is familiar because I kept going back, coming out, and then finding the love, and that gives me sort of like a sense of purpose in my life, like to see the love that I feel in myself in others. But in those darker moments, I feel like none of that's happened, and that I'm just still the same lost little person that I was, just for moments and glimpses, just that memory of depression, that memory of having that time, having that space, they just sort of pop to the surface, and I just go, oh, okay, yeah, I'm still that. You can sort of compartmentalize your demons, but they're still in a compartment waiting to be taken off the shelf. And yeah, so
Well, it's
I have
interesting
a little
that
bit of
level of
after New Year's. So
yeah. Yeah, that level of honesty as well, and being able to say, "Hey, I have dark moments," is something that I feel really comfortable talking about. But I've noticed that even I made a post that kind of said it the other day, and I had people come in being like, "Oh, Josh, you're awesome, man! Like, don't feel bad about yourself." And I'm like, "Oh, no, the whole point of being honest with oneself isn't to be say. I'm not saying that for attention or to try and have sympathy from people. My goodness, it's actually about being honest, and that honesty is, I think, maybe sometimes a little unnerving for people because we do live in a society where we're trying to present our best face, right? We want
yeah,
to.
yeah,
Just the
Yeah,
positive parts,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
not all the uncomfortable parts.
Oh, yeah, I understand exactly what you mean. You're showing us a little bit of self-compassion when you authentically express your darker emotions, and when it lands in a place with them where they're saying something like, "Oh, don't feel bad about yourself," that's about them addressing their own uncomfortability, their own sort of lack of holding for themselves. It's just like, "Oh, I want you to feel good," like when I feel good, it obviously feels good, and I don't want you to have dark emotions because I know what they're like. So please don't do that, and please don't remind me of that within myself. It's kind of like it's a very subtle energetic thing that happens, particularly with friends. Friends that love you, and they love you, but when they see something that kind of conflicts with their sort of way of coming at life, they'll express their love in sort of dark ways. It's like recently I've taken up smoking, not as a fixed habit, but it's just a sensual little pleasure. I had a friend say a whole bunch of smart ass comments, about it. I'm thinking, how interesting being on the dark side of something within another. Like maybe they've lost a relative from, smoking, or who knows. But just sort of like that kind of projection of love, but coming from a real hurt place. We kind of do it all the time. But when you authentically do it and say something and speak your truth around it, yeah, people's reactions are really funny.
Definitely. And I personally think that if we did have a society where people could express their small, dark moments in a way that was holistic to oneself, that would actually be a healthier society, ironically. So, by expressing moments of unhealth, that actually is a healthy act. And that's one of those things that we were not taught in schools, we're not taught in society, we're not taught in any way, shape, or form, actually. And in fact, it's actively, as we discussed before, discouraged.
Yeah,
So it is a
yeah.
funny, it's a funny world. But I do think that the more people that are just being just totally real and totally honest, it'll become a culture over time. It's just going to be a process to dislodge all of the false images and the pain points that we've been working with for so long before this.
Mm, mm. Yeah, education's got a lot to answer for. It's the only system we've got at the moment, but the education system, the Western education system, we know there's issues when we have things like Steiner schools sort of like trying to push a better way of coming at educating our children. But at the same time, they've still got to follow a curriculum. Like there's still stages to the education curriculum, and there's still a level of like conditioning. That conditions us to sort of the mainstream of society. Where they want us to be sort of valuable, participating members of society. They being, like whatever you call the collective unconscious that makes up society. And we sort of make it conscious through our politicians, and then we sort of then either have a scapegoat or we have someone we can cheer for. But yeah, it's like how we honestly and authentically relate to ourselves and to our nearest and dearest is essentially how society should be run. Like, and we're starting to head in that direction with a more sort of like feminine approach to business. There's more women in positions of power. So, I mean, that's a push in the right direction. But then it's almost like that feminine ethic gets sort of like co-opted, and yeah. Yeah. Like I work for a female boss and have done for the last 10 years, and I see them trying to be masculine in what is essentially a masculine world, and they've got it. They can, like women have that masculine essence, so they can, you know, be in a position of responsibility and know how to handle it. But the advantage with women, particularly mothers, they temper it with this sort of like compassion, just for individuals, and sometimes they can be a little bit sort of taken resentfully from grown-ups because they might see it as like micromanagement, the fact that this person cares and would do it for you if they could, which is a little bit overstepping, how businesses should be run. Like men tend to delegate better. You do it, whereas women will delegate it but follow up on it and care about it, sort of thing. So I think it does start like we're going to fix the world, you've got to get spiritual about it. And I kind of agree with, I'm not sure which Buddhist teacher it was. It could have been a Dalai Lama. I think it was the Dalai Lama. He said if the world's going to be fixed, it's going to take the mothers to do it.
Mm.
So that kind of mothering ethic, I think that's starting to seep more and more into society. We're a much more tolerant society than we were.
Oh my God. Last 10 years has been phenomenal in terms of changes in mindset, eh?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There has been a bit of a leveler out there. And I don't even want to go into, that big burp and the vibration that, happened over the last couple of years. But I think in a lot of ways it was a fucking control alt delete for a lot of people. It's like for me, even for me, where I thought once again I was at a certain level of my awareness and, happy with my practice and where I sat in the world, to suddenly, be left a little bit reeling from that. Like I didn't realize how much I was getting from my community at that time. It's like just we can talk and we can talk, but and that's what we tended to do when we were sort of in lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
But I found it's sharing space and a kind of like a vision, like being in the same room with someone. Like I'm kind of big on like sharing space with people, and that was partly my reason for wanting to be live with you in person. But at the same time, I know you at a point now where your avatar projected at me. It's almost like I can feel who you are, sort of thing, and I can easily sort of relate to you energetically as well as rationally.
Yeah. Well, I also share that resonance with you, Colin, and actually it's been really cool because I got to watch you with your son Zane a number of times now at parties and castle drumming and stuff. And again, because I have such a close relationship with my own son, I see me in you, in the future and all those things too. And it's actually been it's been really healing for my heart just to see that masculine role model of being such a loving and caring dad, and feeling that for myself too. But again, not representing the traditional masculine thing, which is like, okay, I'm the strong one. I'll always be the leader. I'll always be all these things, but actually displaying that vulnerability and being able to say I am a leader, but also I am a human being, and I have moments that are heightened and beautiful and blissful, and moments that are low and growing and foundational. And there's something really beautiful about that. I wanted to say that earlier. Nathan also said, much love, Colin and Josh. Good to see you both. And James Shara came in to say, woo, big Colin Whitebeard.
James, I've sat in circles with him a few times. We're just talking about men, fathers, etc. Yeah, like I've sat in his men's circles. They're different. Like they all take on their own flavour. Men's circles, I've found it's a very strange environment when you get men just as men. And I would even say that just like in the social gatherings I've had with men, kind of like have a similar sort of vibration to them. Where men just want to be sort of heard, essentially, and it's very funny because like where men land in those spaces is very much almost like a product of our times. Like I've had familiar themes just arrive in men's circles that just resonate suddenly like a bell going off. There was a time there where there's a bit of grief in a circle, and there was uncertainty whether I should even be here or not. Should I end it? That kind of talk, and then the brothers can speak to that, and you find a good proportion, more than half guys have had those thoughts, had those considerations, and you think, what's going on with men? What's going on with men? And
of course, we think that we are alone in our perspectives. Often.
Yeah. And the greatest gift is knowing that you're not alone. You're not alone. It's just like, statistics shouldn't be comforting for you, but a large proportion of men, like that I've sat with in circles, have thought about it, and my son and myself included. And it's like we went to the edge essentially during a period in our lives, and both stared over the precipice and just thought, you go, I'll go. It was unspoken, but we just knew. And essentially, it was both of us sort of like carrying one another through it. And that's why I still call him one of my greatest teachers. He's actually, Josh, you said, oh, look, I'm showing him how to be a man sort of thing, or I'm leading him, or I'm not leading him, or I'm just loving him. He's actually showing me how to be a man at the moment, because like when I separated from his mother's, I fell very much into my kind of like feminine nature, which is to mother my kids. And I mothered the fuck out of them because I thought I had to replace the mother that wasn't there. And not so much the man stuff. Like some of the man stuff, like was about work, but we'd always sort of conflict over that because we both thought we knew how to do stuff. Like, you know, I'll show you how to do it. I'll show you how to do it. And we're only just finding our way with that now, where we're, you know, like being a man is more than just having competence. It's also being able to work with other men. And so he's shown me how to work with other men in a kind of like a holding way, a respectful way, where, you know, you see the other man just doing his best. But yeah, it's difficult because men are funny things, you know. They do have like a fire. They have a lot of fire, you know. We can think of it as manifesting in many ways, but like that kind of like masculine certainty that men can have can obviously be an advantage or a disadvantage. And and if you're not conscious, now I've got to use this quote. It came from Alistair, who's at Castle drumming with us. Beautiful Sufi guy. His lineage tribal, Celtic, but he had this little bit of sort of wisdom that came from one of his Sufi teachers. He said the longest. I'll do the accent for what it's worth because it came from one of his California Sufi teachers. He said, the longest journey you'll ever take is the longest journey a man will ever take is 17 inches. It's from his brain to his heart. So, and it is.
That was a great North American accent, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. But like it is really, it is the longest journey men essentially take, and because we become disconnected from that in our youth, you know, we at some point there's a natural sort of division between our heart and our minds when we sort of feel the separation from our mothers, when we want to sort of like do it for ourselves. It's just like, oh, I've got to think my way through this now. You know, like I can't sort of like I can always go home to mum and be comforted by that feminine energy in a sense, or the home of a relationship. But as a man, you sort of got to like add your sort of like energy to that, carry your own weight, plus, you know, also the gift of wanting to carry others as well along on your journey. But energetically, how that gets expressed these days, you know, dad goes to work, comes home, he's tired and he doesn't give a shit about anyone. He's done his bit. You know, he hasn't made that journey from here to here at work. He's not going to do it in 5 minutes at home. So, like, living that heart-centered life is really hard to do, particularly in all-male work environments. Even though there's this sort of weird undercurrent of love, particularly, you know, like in guys that are sort of tradies and things like that, there's sort of, it's there, but then it's not, you know, because like you have the energy of guys that are just disconnected, just totally disconnected. And
I've always found it quite. I found it quite hard working in trades for that reason. I've always enjoyed the work itself, but I've always been like, holy fuck, this is a social atmosphere in which I have to keep a front and I have to be something I'm not in order to fit in and all that stuff. So I very much hear you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Well, that was my background, trade background. And like, that was the old days when they used to haze people, you know, like there was initiation. You know, initiation into sort of these work environments almost.
Like hazing and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, hazing, just cruelty, you know, just general cruelty from young men that didn't know what to do with that energy, essentially. You know, the ones that were most together were the ones who were playing competitive sports and things like that. But the ones that were just a bit of, you know, had any kind of resentment for the world, well, you know, that in some ways it's kind of applauded in those male environments, being able to one-up your friends, even if you're just using your mouth. So, you know, those competitive masculine environments, they can become quite kind of like, yeah, not good.
But it's interesting as well. So you're saying that Zane, your son, has been able to teach you things as he's gotten older too, and I'm prepared. I'm prepared for that with both of my kids.
Yeah.
as they come into their adulthood to be like, okay, yeah, we're equals, or maybe I'll even take a back seat at points. So it's very inspiring to hear that, brother.
Yeah. Well, the way I reflect on it now, and this is something I've learned essentially from my job, which is a teacher dealing with young men, is that like at a certain age, they're very much about their own identity, and there's not much you can do about that. I mean, they start at a certain point leaning into their peers, and so like if you sit in a position of judgment over any actions that they take, you're kind of like missing the point.
Mm.
It's like you got to learn from what they do, even though some of it is just like you only hear about later on, and you go, oh God, went off the rails a bit there, but like it's difficult. It's really difficult because like there's got to be this sort of acceptance, non-judgment, but at the same time offering it maybe a solution or a better way or a
Guidance, yeah.
slight sort of like I'm not going to reach over and grab your rudder, but hey, maybe you want to kind of like steer away from those rocks. But that's about all you got, and you got to do it with love and grace because the moment you raise your voice, it's just like white noise coming at them. They've heard it all before, and you're just a part of that. You can be the disciplinarian, but society's fucking full of that. That's what we've got at schools. That's what's in education systems, and we sort of like it's crazy. We partner with that. Like we partner with the education system to churn out these sort of functioning, kind of contributing adults. Like. Yeah, like work is a funny one. Like, how should you feel about work? It's like you've got to contribute in the world. Like, unless you're independently wealthy, which I'm not. And how do you come to a sort of sense of wholeness with that? Should it be just like a servitude? You're turning up, and essentially you're only there for the money. If that's the case, if that's how you're going to think about it, well, that's no better than kind of selling yourself. So, like. Wherever you go, there you are. It doesn't matter where you are. You've got to be centered. You've got to be yourself. And if you can't be yourself at work, and if you don't feel like it aligns with a sort of higher purpose, it's kind of torture, And like I've seen my son punish himself for his job, but he's so about kind of carrying his own weight and being his own man. And something they identified at Castle, which was kind of funny. Like in the intuition workshop, the person opposite said, "Oh, you're a leader." And he's been told this a couple of times, and I don't want to be a fucking leader. Well, I said, you don't have to do anything different, mate. All you've got to do is keep doing what you're doing and people follow. That's what a leader is now. Because he's doing that at his work and it gives him kicks, like he's showing the guys at work how to do things and not necessarily even doing that, but just doing his own thing and doing it really well, and getting called on to sort of like do that all the time and show others how to do it, and so he doesn't mind doing that, but he doesn't like thinking of himself as a leader. So
totally. Well, look, man, I've actually thought about this quite a bit. It's because leaders in our past and present abuse their power, and so it's a weird situation because when the word leadership comes up, it's like, oh my God, I can't see a lot of examples of what good leadership looks like. Therefore, I'd rather not be one. But that actually might be the biggest. One of the biggest things in our generation is to redefine leadership and be able to stand forward in that way too, right? Because leadership in the past is like the person, again, bossing everyone around, and we don't need more of that.
No. We are coming to a sort of like that within the business world. It's less hierarchical than it used to be in certain kind of institutions. It's particularly in tech companies, they seem to be the way forward on how to sort of run businesses at a certain level. But then how does that filter down to the rest of the economy and the rest of the population? But like that kind of like way of, there's no sort of superiority there. But when we think leadership, what are we thinking about? How businesses are run, or how politics are run, how our nations are run, how fucking even our local governments are run, and it's like we get the leaders we sort of deserve in a sense.
I think definitely agree with that. Yeah.
No, and it's like we take no responsibility for that. I mean, we think we're taking responsibility when we vote, But like we've already spoken to, we'd like to see a better world where it's sort of leaders are true leaders and they're respected. And the system as it is, which is a two-party preferred system, it's an adversarial process. It just leads to this sort of like masculine way of coming at things. Where it's not about collaboration, it's not about sort of like true delegation and the true sort of sense of reciprocity in kind of like serving others so they can serve you. But I don't know. I know democracy is a funny thing. I like what Winston Churchill said about it. Out of all the systems of government, it's the worst system of government. What is it? It's oh shit! I wish I could remember now. Democracy.
It's a great idealistically, but not necessarily in practice, right?
Well, it's along those lines. No, it's along those lines. It's democracy. It's the best out of all the options, essentially. It's the worst system of government, except all the others, sort of thing.
Except every other system, which is more even worse. Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly.
I wish I could remember it because it's kind of fucking a profound quote. But my point is, like, it's like at least we've got democracy in a sense. You know what I mean? And then you kind of twist it on what does it even mean when you kind of feel like the potential tyranny of rule. And then you realise you're subject to that realm of yourself, like the political realm of yourself. Like it's many layers out, but we have to come into relationship with the world at certain levels.
So my dear friend Sasha came on, and he just actually put the quote, and it says, "Democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others that have been tried." by Winston Churchill as well. So yeah. And also, I wanted to say that Sasha came in to say that I like that point, connecting through a learning mindset, and that's talking about busting that hierarchical understanding and having it so through the actual act of learning together is connecting together, is learning together. And I think that's a very, very good point.
Yeah. I'll just hold that point, Mike, because I've got to just get a drink of water.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, thank you so much, Sasha, for coming in with that quote and coming in with your confirmations. We love you dearly. And actually, just to put a little plug, Sasha is a friend of ours who has been helping us with projects that we're doing with Ethereal Misfits and displays. I'm just saying that Sasha displays that non-hierarchical or more collaborative way of being and helps us with our business endeavors. So we thank Sasha greatly in all ways. You just said thank you, Josh and Colin.
Thank you, Sasha. Yeah.
Yeah, so you are a school teacher, and can you tell me how you see the changes? Now, you were just saying you don't want to try and alter people because there are changes in men and women these days, but can I ask you, what do you see as the benefits, I guess you could say, like the strengths of the new upcoming generation and potentially the weaknesses, if that feels appropriate?
It's interesting. It's an interesting question because I've gone from training apprentices. That's how I originally started teaching. So training apprentices is pretty much an easy gig. You turn up, you tell them some information, they regurgitate it. You make friends along the way, sort of thing, with these young men who've got jobs. But essentially, the incentive for them is they've got a job. They're paid to be in that seat. And so, like, after 4 years of that, I thought, yeah, I'm a really good teacher. I can put on a bit of a show and kids seem to enjoy it. They're learning something. They're getting a trade. Made me feel quite chuffed. And then I started teaching at a high school after 4 years, and I've been doing that for another 4 years. So it's been 8 years in essentially education or training. And I'm not a teacher. Like, I haven't got a degree. They call us in the contract other teachers. And so, like, I've rocked up to this education institution, I train. It's called a trade college, so it's for veterans schools. So it does vocational education and training in schools. So for the HSC Year 11 and 12, you can choose to do trade-related courses. And so I teach from that area. I teach from my trade. And so, like, I'm not a teacher as such, and I've got permission to sort of teach students because loopholes. And so
Nice.
I've gone in
I
there
love that. I
training.
love that. I love that. By the way, just before we
Yeah, yeah,
start.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so, like, I thought I was training apprentices when I first rocked up there because that was my background, training young people about that age because, like, first years are around that age. And I couldn't have been any more wrong-headed about it. I didn't realise what was in front of me or what was between me and them, essentially. And that's the institution of education. First, you've got to come to an understanding of that. And the teachers that teach as a profession, like professional teachers, well, that's all they've ever known. They've gone straight from an education institution into another one so they can go back to the education institution and keep on doing what they're doing, learning and teaching and learning. And they've got a different attitude, and they're a crazy bunch. Like, they're of a kind almost. They start out with really good intentions of wanting to help our youth, and then they get sort of trapped in the institution of education where people are not judged on their merits as a person, their individual merits. They're judged on, results, and their behaviour. Are you a good little sort of like citizen? Are you going to do the right thing here? We have cornerstones for, how we treat others in respect to all this sort of stuff around their behaviour. And it's pretty strict because it's a school and we've got young people. And so you're taking responsibility not for just their education, but how they should see the world in a sense. You run a lot of strong social messaging with them around sort of maybe habits, like vaping is a big one at the moment, so, and obviously there's like health things as well, like how they talk to others. Like we have, what do they call it? It's one on relating, like sexual relating, and it sort of workshops that. So they have other stuff going on as well. But essentially, these are kids. These are school kids. Like we're supposed to call them young people. Don't call them kids. Call them students or young people. And you see the potential in them. Like they're at the point where they're almost done with school. They stick a fork in and they're done. Like they really are. Like a lot of them are, sucking out the last opportunities of being in school. But a lot of them are turning up and just playing the game of being in school. And
That's what I did. That's what I did in a very big way, man. I was playing the
It's
game of
easy to
being in
do
school.
too. It's easy to then put what you're doing then is putting that institution. It's not just the teacher's protection from like authentically relating to you. It's also your protection of authentically relating to anyone that could possibly teach you. It's like you can quite comfortably sit in this sort of like no man's land of like turning up and not getting into any trouble and, like sort of flying under the radar, it's just like easy to do. Occasionally pushing your boundaries and I didn't expect you to get into trouble, Josh. What'd you do that for?
It's easier not. It's easier not to make a mess or not to make a stir, so you can go unnoticed, right? That's definitely true.
Yeah, and look, I have the same philosophy when I'm like dealing with these young people, and I've tried to sort of like tell the teachers. I said, when they go looking for trouble, I said, trouble's all you're going to find. I said, why do that to yourself? Because like then you've got to deal with the whole sort of system. You've got to deal with all the outcomes of that. And so like, yeah, I'd turn a blind eye to a lot of stuff. So like a lot of behavior that goes on, because I find it really kind of like clenches my jaw when students that are in my class turn up with these yellow cards called BMCs, behavior modification card. What the hell? It's just like achieved, not achieved, whatever. I've got to tick a box. Oh, it's just go achieve, whatever. Like did he have his phone away when he was in your class? Like I'd give a shit. So, and I think the advantages that they have, young people, and they're the same advantages that we've always had, as they've got a natural curiosity and they've got a natural sort of resilience. There's a lot you got to do to break a young person, and like I've seen them break. I've seen young people break there. I've had people crying. I've had people go into fugue states. I've had people yelling at me, swearing at me. So they do break, but to get to that point, you've got to, as a not even as an educator, as a human being, you've got to wonder why. What the fuck, What the fuck? Or you can do what some of our teachers do, where they go into the sort of classroom, say that person's a bad person, not so many words, a bad person, and they don't deserve our respect or love, or kind of like, let's box them in behind it, maybe a BMC or an internal suspension or this or that or the other. Oh, you're having problems, are you, little Johnny? We have counsellors here for that, and like my philosophy is that every one of us should be, in a sense, a counsellor for these young people because they do have potential, and like you see the people that kind of like get it, they get the part that this is just a game we're playing, the education thing. They've been in the game long enough that they get it and they know why they're there. They're there to sort of like enter into the workforce. So, yeah, so, I think one of their biggest strengths these days is also one of their biggest weaknesses is they're kind of like, it's kind of attention span, but it's where they're sending their focus, and they're sending their focus through devices these days. And I'm really ambivalent about it. Like I'm really ambivalent, but we've got teachers that want to come down on really hard on them around devices, and I'm thinking, I don't think you get it. These things aren't going away. They've only just started, and these young people that work now have never known an existence without one. And so what do we do about that? How can we actually leverage that to make their lives better? How can we leverage that? This is my thinking, just off the cuff sort of thing. I've done it a few times. How can we leverage that to actually make even education work better? Like where there's sort of like sort of like just picking up a bit of education here and then, instead of a lesson that goes for 60 minutes where I'm blurting it out and they're ignoring me because they're thinking other stuff. How can we integrate that with how they're integrating, like their social sort of interaction as well? How can we sort of like marry into that kind of like how young people are so interconnected, and when old people sit back and go, oh, that's the problem, is it? I'm thinking, is that the problem? Right? Is that the problem because you hear about bullies online and you want to protect your darling from it? Is that the problem? You're not seeing it as for what it truly is, where these young people are more connected than we know what to do with, or that we can understand. And it's just like they have a sense of another through that portal of a device. And I don't think that is a learned skill. I think it's a conditioned skill from a very young sort of like a really young forming mind. It forms into the consciousness. So these new consciousnesses that are emerging are digitally sort of interconnected.
Their conditioning is from a young age is to have the device, or what? Could you redefine that again?
As a medium of communication, they're sort of like the first generation to be able to do it sort of remotely, but still have the same feeling we have when we're in the room together. You know what I mean?
I totally hear you, and I'm sure that the coronavirus probably cemented a lot of that stuff in as well, right?
Yeah. Particularly for young people. But I think in a lot of ways, if it was a part of your development, your brain's different. You know what I mean? Your brain's going to be different. So they're emerging into this sort of new consciousness that we don't fully fathom and we don't fully understand. It's like we're running this weird social experiment and we don't know what the outcomes are going to be. And as educators, we just sit in fear and think that, well, if I don't understand it, I'll just ban it. Well, that kind of doesn't work because, like, then you're sitting in front of a bunch of people that are sort of sitting there kind of semi-resentfully because they've had this thing that's a part of them sort of like taken away from them. And, like, I've seen people suffer, like, kind of the lack of it, like, start getting sort of anxieties, like, the knee jig, like it's an addiction essentially for them. And it's like, what do we do about that? I've got no idea. I just came at a sense with like, okay, I just want to create the least harm here, and I just want to do my job.
Yeah,
And
what
like,
I hear you saying, what I hear you saying is you don't want to fight against the tide either. If something
no,
is, if you know that something is now a part of their reality, you don't want to be like, I'm going to take that away from you, because that wouldn't even actually help. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so like then I'm left with what is the metric for what I do. The metric for what I did was used to be like churning out what they call competencies. Like a unit of competency is a little part of your training course. And so like in the apprentice world, there's a funding model for that. Did a competency that they could be funded like from the government. In the education institution, it's just like bums on seats. They turn up, get ticked off the roll, they're paid for. And so my model for how I provide what I'm doing now is not about like you need to get this competency or you'll get the sack or anything like that. If you want to know it, I'll teach it. If you don't want to know it, what can I do about it? And that seems like kind of like pretty harsh. It's like I don't care in a sense. And in a sense, it's like if I was to care on the outcome of like their results or whatever, I'd be dismally sort of disappointed in myself because like in terms of where they are, like educationally, I mean, they're in a trade college. A lot of them have come there as sort of almost like a last resort. You didn't do well at school, little Johnny, I'll send you to this trade college and you can get a trade job.
That's
And so like, they're really challenged. They're really challenged by like a higher level of maths and things like that. Some are, some aren't. I don't know if those proportions have gotten better or worse, like in terms of where we're at with the what you maybe call 3Rs and things like that. I do see a lack of kind of like people being able to write, people being able to do sort of maths. But then I reflect on the fact that I'm kind of weirdly wired that way. Like maths and rationality used to be my jam before I sort of like dropped in and like I did a lot of work up here before I dropped 17 inches. Yeah. So I kind of get maths, and like when I first started sort of teaching, I couldn't get why other people couldn't get it. And then I reflected and I thought, oh shit, you're pretty good at maths. Like even when I was like feeling shit about myself, and we'd recently moved from like Sydney to the Central Coast, and I started year 9 up here, and I hated school down there, and it was just torture. And I came up here, and it was kind of like a fresh start. And then I just thought, well, there's nothing else to do, so I'll pay attention to school a little bit. And then I did a maths test and got second in the year. And they go, what are you doing in this remedial maths class? We'll stick you in the advanced maths class. And I went into that, and it was like, oh shit, this is like a foreign language for me because I never had the basics. But like I could understand that I could get there, and like I kind of got a certain level of maths that kind of like, yeah, it's like I don't know. It's like a way of thinking, and it's kind of fun. And it kind of makes fun, like it's a fun way of looking at the world as well. Because like physics, for example, is the language of the language of physics is maths. Like how we see the world and how we sort of break the world down. Well, you've got your perceptions there; they're a thing, but that's sort of the realm of psychology, and you can get metaphysical about it and things like that. The actual real world and how it takes shape in the world of forms and how you can measure it and things like that and how it behaves. I mean, yeah, that's all quantifiable, and it's fascinating, and it's still fascinating to me now. But where does it meet us? Where does it meet us?
I mean, even something as simple as kicking a soccer ball is all completely maths, right? I also am a person who loves math. I love math, and I love the way physics and math interact. So I'm very much feeling you on that one.
Yeah. Like that was how I originally came into my rationality. I wasn't too much about language. In my mind, I was kind of like with words. I was confused. I'd never read much like when I was young, other than little kind of adventure things, and that was about it. So my rationality sort of kind of just lent too much into science when I was younger, and it's essentially where the kind of world's at. We're leaning too much into that rationality, that kind of that schism that happened around the time of the Renaissance, where we kind of like split apart, sort of like rationality from the metaphysical or the religious way of coming at the world, and yet it didn't do much about the fact that we still, in a sense, want to frame things religiously. We want to frame things sort of like in a structure that has beauty, and there's beauty in the world, like obviously. And how do what is beauty? So then you get into the philosophy of things, and that's like that was the second part of my rationality sort of coming into itself, was like when I went off to university after I'd done the trade thing and like wasn't making me happy. It wasn't what it was not making me happy. It was just like I wasn't fucking happy anyway, and I thought there was something to being that I that wasn't in front of me. There's something to this sense of being that I had that wasn't sort of immediately present. And so I thought I'll go and try and work that out. And I thought I'd just do undergrad psychology, and like got to university and rats and stats. That's undergrad psychology. So as soon as you get there doing like a arts degree, you just realise there's a lot more on offer. So like philosophy became a thing for me, So I studied how rationality works, going back to the ancient Greeks essentially, and followed that. And then as my interest formed through my degree, ended up applying my sort of curiosity to cognitive science. And also that's one of the majors I ended up with, is cognitive science, which is essentially an interdisciplinary way of studying the mind, And the other major I had was history and philosophy of science and technology. I wasn't happy with the fact that, yes, science works. I wanted to know why it worked and why we could fucking actually sort of like say things with any kind of certainty, and what was the history of that? Like just the history of time I found fascinating. It's just like people love to say, oh yeah, time's an illusion. And they're kind of right, but in the sense that, yeah, they're kind of missing the point. It's like we created time. And it's like time serves us, and we've got this sense now with the way we've got what they call equinoctial time, which is equal daylight hours and equal nighttime hours. Like originally we used to have like the day divided into 12. So if it was longer, you had longer hours. And then equinoctial hours came and we started timekeeping. And instead of time serving us, we started to serve time, Had this mechanistic way of coming at the world, So do we blame the mechanistic world on the fact that we've created time, or that we've got this way of coming at time? And then you follow it through, then what is time? And then they start going, well, we don't know. And then, Einstein says time is relative. Yeah, it is. It's relative to your inertial frame of reference. But what does that even mean? Like we've got a sense of time. We've got a sense of time passing. We know we've got this sense of time going fast and going slow. And so, like, what is the true nature of time? It's just it's a fascinating sort of like idea to just play around and with your head, lose time over. Yeah, just to think time is an illusion. It's just like, oh, you don't get off that easy. You don't get off that easy. You know what I mean?
Well,
what are you going to do with the time? It's like, what does time mean to you?
And we call them one-liners, me and Lily. When you see a one-liner, time is an illusion. That's a one-liner. It's like, well, that's one way to think of it, but there's obviously everything is more complex, right?
Yeah.
Colin, I want to give you a heads up, man. We've got 5 minutes left before it's 10 o'clock, or 6 minutes. So I think we're probably going to head towards wrap-up for around 6 minutes from now. I would love, just because again, everything you share is amazingly helpful. If someone were to say to you, "Hey, we would love some generalized advice to the world," I know that's a big question, and I know that there's so many ways it could go that it might be a bit overwhelming. But if there was generalized advice for the world, what would you want to say to people?
Generalized advice to the world. Get to know yourself. Sit in silence. Sit in space. Sit with nature, but get to know yourself. And know that you're the source of it all. You're a little universe unto yourself, but also the universe you see is your universe. So what kind of universe do you want to see? Because it's a co-creation like this universe that we see in front of us is a co-creation of us all. And so, like, as much as you love the love, you've got to sort of understand and accept the suffering and the hate in the world. You've got to come from yourself. There's nothing worth hating on. There is really nothing worth hating on. Is like, accept the world as it is and realize it's here for you.
Yeah, but what I hear you saying there is, don't accept just the parts you want to, accept it all, and through that there's a transformation that happens as well.
Yeah. There's a transcendence through suffering, Josh. It's a fact. Okay, so like, we all suffer. You'll suffer slights. You'll suffer social slights. Okay, explore those. Don't just explore the big ones, because like, you presented with like the sum total of human knowledge right there in front of you on a device. You can disappear down any rabbit hole you want, but explore your own suffering. See where that goes. Like Solzhenitsyn said, like the division between sort of like tyranny and kind of like good governance, the line between hate and love, all of that doesn't run down divisions in society. It just doesn't. It runs down the center of every man's heart. So you got to understand, you can learn something from really malevolent parts of yourself. You really have to sit with that. You can't look at history and go, oh yeah, oh, it was so terrible that that Auschwitz was a thing. Like, wow, it would have been horrible to be one of those inmates. Well, no, you've got to imagine a world where you were the prison guard as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's a really big burden. It's you've got to sort of have, you've got to understand that is within every human soul. That division goes down the middle of your own heart. And until you understand that about yourself, how can you act in the world where it's coming from a place of kindness and empathy and compassion and understanding? It's just like that. You got to love your brother. You not only got to love your brother, you got to love your enemy. Thanks, JC. Like he said that on the Sermon on the Mount. He said they may have said, and he was referring to the fucking old prophets, like the Old Testament, where it was all fucking fire and brimstone. They may say, love your neighbor. He said, but no, I'm saying love your enemy. Love your enemy, because who are you to judge? How can you lean
and that those aspects that we see in our enemies and the darkness in the world they do exist within us as well, and that's
yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Like, usually, when there's something in your brother's eye, it's not because you can see it. It's because your vision is there's something stuck in your eye as well. Like Jesus says that too. Before you can sort of clear your brother's vision, first clear yourself. First get that thing out of your own eye. First come to an honest intention with the world. Try to have a true vision of the world, and hold it all. But
I asked you that question, that wrap-up question, because I knew that it would not disappoint, and it absolutely didn't, my friend. Like, that's an incredible teaching, and incredibly well put, the way that you phrased it all as well. I love you so much, and what I would suggest is this is the first of many live streams. So if you're down to do this again, I very much am too.
Look me up during the school holes, mate. I'll do it again during the school holidays. That's when I'm like off, and we get like so many holidays. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Very fun. Okay. Thank you so much, Colin. I'm gonna go off here. Stick around though for a second, okay?
No worries.
Yeah. Thank you so much.